Thanks for inviting me. I did this event last year as well, and it was really good, and really happy to support the people who are working hard on the ground with homeless people at the moment, because somebody talks about this being a hard job. This is nothing like a hard job compared to that, and fair play to everybody for doing that, and I'm very happy to support you. I'm going to start the night off with a little story. It's a true story. I've a lot of stories that are true that have something to do with homelessness and homeless people and homeless in the family and things like that over the years. But this is a friend, and I've written about him quite a lot actually. You don't need to know who he is, you just listen to the story. It's called Lasagna, a true story, and it really helps for stories if people can be quiet, please. I'll be gone in a few minutes, thank you. Lasagna. Years later, when I think of him, what rises up is the famous lasagna, which he himself cooked and which was such a surprise to the rest of us. No one would have credited that a bedsit chronic like Jim could even conceive of lasagna, never mind get around to cooking it. But Jim had invited us all around to his place for that Friday night for a dinner party, and it turned out that, despite all our sniggering at the absurdity of the idea, he had meant it. I don't remember what the lasagna tasted like, just the look of it. The part brown top layer of cheese, appetizing and aromatic, real lasagna. I remember Jim drunkenly pulling the lasagna out of the oven and holding it up to show off before multiple witnesses that it truly existed. I remember him explaining that he had got the brown effect by putting it under the grill for 5 minutes after the bake, a trick of the trade he had learned from his cousin, a chef in London, and which could also be used to round off Spanish omelettes and the like. We were all already twisted on buckfast and hot knives, of course. We wolfed down the lasagna and the homemade garlic bread. I reckon that was Jim's last ever party, his everlasting party. We all went back home to recover Sunday morning or afternoon at the latest, but it lasted Jim the rest of his life. St. Vincent de Paul took over shortly after. They gave him shoes and clothes and toothpaste and food, all things which were more or less completely useless to him. But I think they paid his rent too, or at least shielded him from eviction. I knew Ted, his landlord, well. It's a small town. Ted was a real schemer, and he couldn't wait to get rid of Jim and get some new regular tenants in. Sometimes me or one of the lads would drop up with a flagon or two and a packet of tobacco as a gift for Jim, out of our old fondness and our wish to not see him suffer too badly. The DT's is a hard road, trampled by merciless elephants that do not exist, but who can crush the last wheeze out of you nonetheless. Jim's last eyes were small and round and fearful and moist and full of poison. They looked at you like a plague might look at you. They seemed to draw the life out of everything they took in. You felt a little paler every time. His last hands were calloused and cracked, as if all his life he had been handling corrosives. It was hard to avoid shaking hands with him. He was a needy, in-your-face kind of drunk. But I did avoid it, even at the risk of causing offence. I simply held my hands behind my back any time he came near me. I didn't want to catch anything. Everything about Jim was consumed by disease. He himself was a consuming disease. Things became sick by belonging or associating with him. He had a sick settee, a sick radio, sick t-shirts and shoes, a sick old guitar with one string, a sick pair of cheap sunglasses he wore around the bedsit, as if the sun of July were already above him. He had a sick past full of sick memories and sick friends like me, his sick listeners. During these last visits, Jim often spoke to us of a son he'd had many years ago with an ex-girlfriend from whom he had broken up before the child had been born. We had never before heard of the child, nor a girlfriend. He said he was hoping to make contact again with the child, now 17 years of age. The son was, according to Jim, some kind of international martial arts prodigy. The son was playing for Ireland, Jim said, covered in glory and touring the world. Jim was waiting for the son to turn 18 when he would be able to legally make contact. The fantasy animated Jim greatly whenever he spoke of it, but weeks could go by when it wouldn't make mention. Another last thing he told me was that he had stopped shitting. I said that was because he had stopped eating. He said life was much less complicated when you neither ate nor shed. Another last thing he spoke of was time. He said that he had learned to move around inside time. He said he could travel up and down his own life like it was a bridge connecting nothing to nowhere, he said. There's a black hole at either end of us, he said. Sometimes he went back to his deep childhood just to watch himself sleeping as a little boy. This was very calming, he said. The blankets undulated noiselessly, he said, like a secret sea. He said that deaf sailors had the most beautiful lives. He never snored when he was little. He often went to his own funeral too. There was a bigger crowd at it than he would have expected, given all the people he had pissed off over the years and all the snobs there were in our town. He was troubled by reports of another local drunk who had recently died by smoke inhalation during a house fire. Only the priest, another notorious sozzler, had gone to that funeral. The visions, or whatever you want to call them, settled him down. I dreamt last night that I killed him, that Ted, the landlord, had given me $4,000 to beat him to death with a hammer. I can clearly see his face gripped with shock and agony after the first blow. I see his hand on his broken head and the thick gunk streaming out between his fingers. Then I strike him again and again and again until the job's done. For some time after I woke up from this dream, I believed it had really happened, and I felt oppressed by my guilt. Never before had a dream made such perfect sense. Thank you very much, and I look forward to the rest of the night. Thank you.
Thank you, Dave. Now, sticking to my notes, and I think it's always best, our next performer was also here last year, because I remember chatting to her, and I remember being very impressed by what she had to do. The next poet is going to be Rachel Hegarty. Now, how's this for a list? Widely published in national and international news journals, broadcast on RTE Radio. Rachel's a winner of the Francis Ledwidge Prize and the Overage New Writer of the Year Award. She was shortlisted for the Hennessy New Irish Award, and the list goes on and on and on. Ladies and gentlemen, put your hands together for Rachel Hegarty. You look great.